This morning about the ANC's NEC meeting, which was followed by a press briefing that was hosted, of course, by Ace Magashule, who is the ANC Secretary General. Political analyst Dumisani Hlophe is here in studio to give us his perspectives. So let's, as I said before the break, pick up on the issue of President Jacob Zuma. Everybody talking about the fact, was it discussed? Is he going? When is he going? Is it a matter of time? Or is this all hot air that actually is not even being discussed, which I somehow don't believe. But what is your sentiment? What do you think is going on behind the scenes?
Behind the scenes, I think there are some serious conversations with the new top six. What they ought to have avoided, though, is to go into an NEC meeting and have this issue tabled. And by the way, I think it was tabled because some people were angry that he appealed against that decision that he can't appoint the NDPP and that it should be done. So that angered a few people.
Yeah.
And then that's why it came from the floor and not necessarily that it was tabled as part of the, the agenda. But I think that the consensus that emanated from there is that possibly he can be the part of the face of the ANC moving towards the 29 election.
Yeah.
So the conclusion is that it will be advisable for him to go. The question is when and how. For me, it will be politically unstrategic to make that decision at an NEC meeting and have it recorded and all of that, like they did with President Thabo Mbeki.
Yeah.
It will make sense if they speak to him behind the scene and he comes out voluntarily and says that, look, for the sake of progress, I hand over to the new leadership crew. That will protect himself, it will protect the organization, but similarly the country at large.
So let's talk about the State of the Nation address. That's around the corner. It literally is around the corner. And there is talk as to whether or not the President of South Africa, President Jacob Zuma, will be delivering that address or not.
Well, Cyril Ramaphosa says they don't want to humiliate him. Yeah. And I think if they remove him prior to the State of the Nation address, that will humiliate him. So my suspicion is that he will deliver the State of the Nation address. But I think the bulk of the content will be drawn from the top leadership of the ANC. So it will be informed by your January 8th statement, the ANC Lekgotla, followed by the Cabinet Lekgotla. And because they are taking over the reins of the ANC and government, I see them, I see the content of the State of the Nation address largely coming from the new leadership, but I suspect that he will deliver the State of the Nation address.
Yeah.
Call it a farewell State of the Nation address.
Yeah. It's not going to be easy for him,
some metric dance type of a farewell.
But it won't be easy for him.
Look, it won't be. Okay, here's a difficulty. Here's a difficulty, Leanne, because, you see, even if they say they don't want to humiliate him, I think he will have a difficulty standing up in that platform, delivering a State of the Nation address without necessarily the aura associated with that position. Yeah. Because everyone will look at him as a lame duck president, as an outgoing president, as a president who his very own top leadership has asked 3 times that he steps down. Yeah. So, and opposition parties have done that. So you standing up to say this is where we are going as a society with that type of compromise, it will not necessarily, do him well. But I think it will be better if he does it. Yeah. But then he still has to come back to answer questions on the State of the Nation.
But will that be good for the ANC, though? Because the ANC have promised swift action. We're seeing a lot happening, but a lot, again, you talk about the fact that Ramaphosa has said he does not want to humiliate President Jacob Zuma. But then we look at issues around the appeal at the courts, at the MPA. And this is appealing a decision that Cyril Ramaphosa is to appoint the prosecuting authority, and yet Zuma doesn't want that because he still wants the power, but Ramaphosa has been granted the power. So there's this little battle happening there. Then Dumisani coming and saying that really Ramaphosa and Zuma need to work together. Is this really possible?
Yeah, partly it's unfortunate because to throw Ramaphosa into the deep end, because I think they must continue with the sense of this being a collective decision, of the top 6. And I've heard Ace even yesterday saying that, Cyril Ramaphosa must handle this matter. I think it's a matter of the top 6. You're right. It's a very catch-22 situation because, if I'm not mistaken, there was a decision by the ANC that says these appeals that the president has been engaged in, they need to be moved, properly. But here's the issue, Leanne. I think Cyril has adopted a more diplomatic approach. So when Zuma comes back to appeal for that decision, it means that he is not met, Cyril is not met with the diplomacy, with the olive branch it is throwing to President Zuma. And hence some people develop hardened attitudes within the NEC and then from the floor request for his removal.
Yeah. I want to just wrap up this interview and very quickly, because we are seeing the winds of change. We are. I mean, yesterday, the resignation of Anaj Singh, the complete rehaul of the board of ESCOM. We are hearing from the national, from the forfeiture assets agency that they're going to go in and swoop in on the Guptas and the family and McKinsey and Trillian, and the list is just growing and growing and growing. This, of course, is good news. But what is your view on all of this now?
I think, number one, these investigations have been there for some time. But I don't think the people who are doing this work felt like the political environment, atmosphere was proper for them to come out public and execute their conclusion. So I think now with the new leadership, they feel emboldened, to come up publicly and show that they are doing this investigation. So it's proper for state institutions, tasked with executing democratic mandate to be seen to be doing what they have been established to do. So that's good for democracy. If you look at the example of ESCOM, I think for me that is your type of change in terms of strengthening good governance in the state-owned enterprises.
Yeah. I just have one more question for you. I've just been given a little bit more time. George Weah's inauguration is happening. The president was going to attend, and then suddenly after the meeting, it decided he's not going anymore, and instead Minister Nomvula Mokonyane is going to be representing him. Why do you think this decision was taken?
Look, well, there's also the next one about the African Union. Yeah? Yeah, he has to attend the African Union.
And we saw his schedule being released as well, but with big, bold writing on the top. Things can change at very short notice.
And it's up to the 15th of Feb, just after Valentine's. It's not stretching to June or something like that. Look, I think this is why sometimes I think I would like to see political psychologists, stand up and do some of these analysis, because I'm trying to think the difficulty that the president will have to go into these official functions with other executive heads of states when it is commonly known that he is on his way out, and part of that departure is not very ceremonious one. Yeah. So it makes it difficult for him to attend these kinds of events. But even beyond that, given the fast pace that things are changing in this country, decisions are happening left and right. Perhaps it's in his best interest to remain in the country.
Yeah, I think it would be. And the fast pace you talk about is long overdue, because people have been wanting to see action, and this has had a detrimental effect on the country. And that's the honest truth. I mean, when we talk about the funds and the money, I mean, we had this conversation with Zwelinzima Vavi earlier in the program, and we're talking about 1 trillion rand being taken from state coffers, and that's an estimate. This is devastating.
This is why the last time I sat here, I said there's no problem with funding education. The money is there. It is how this money is used. But just to pick a bigger picture into this change that you are referring to, remember that these elections, the ANC presidential elections, they were fought on a public platform, beyond the confines of the ANC. And the bigger fight was about change, dealing with issues of corruption and restoring the image of the ANC and all of that. And Cyril Ramaphosa fought on that ticket. And that has resulted, after he wins, on the pressure that you see now, let's see that change here and now. But the interesting part is not the demand which is limited to the African National Congress, parameters. It's some kind of a national, demand. It goes to the public, to the voters, and all of that. And whilst things are happening, people still want to see that ultimate one of President Jacob Zuma leaving. which is a problem, by the way, because part of it means society has reduced all the problem of this country to one man, which is going to create another frustration, because Zuma will leave, and you and I will remain landless and jobless.
Yeah,
and then we'll look for the next person to blame.
We leave it there. And I won't ask you who that next person is, but I'll leave it at that for now. Dumisani Hlophe, political analyst, thank you for giving us your perspectives this morning.
Thank you very much.
The time now is 8 o'clock. Let's go.